It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Tony Dokoupil is with me now from Frewsburg, New York. And Tony, it looks awful out there.
It's pretty bad. For a lot of people waking up in Frewsburg, which is just outside of Jamestown, this is the walk they're making to their car. About 2 feet of snow is on the ground in most of the area. In some parts of Jamestown, rather, it's even more than that. And I want to show you this street sign here. There are some Whoa Nelly drop-offs around here. That street sign, the one behind me, the ridges around here. If you don't know the terrain, you're in trouble. And it's very heavy lake effect snow, so it sits on top of cars. That first traffic light you come to in the morning, everything on your hood is crashing down over the top of your car. You're getting out, you've got to brush it off. Very difficult weather. More than 90 accidents over the weekend, the county sheriff told us. One tow truck operator, family shop that we talked to, they had 70 or 80 calls. That's just one shop. It was so many calls, they had to call friends in. They were dusting off trucks they haven't used in years. The owner, who hasn't been out in more than a decade, he had to get out there himself. They still couldn't keep up. So this is very serious, even for the snowy northern parts of New York State, which is used to snow. Caught them by surprise.
Several inches of snow creating a nightmare for travelers in one of America's busiest cities. Chicago O'Hare and Midway airports grounding nearly 1,400 flights so far.
Take a look at this, near catastrophe for 70 passengers aboard the Delta flight. I'll show you that in a second. This plane skidded off the runway as it landed in snowy Detroit. That's a shot of a parking lot.
There it is. That looks like a plane off the runway.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say reported cases of influenza are slowly rising across the country. In Utah, 31 patients who visited Intermountain healthcare clinics and hospitals last week tested positive for influenza. Not particularly high numbers right now, but doctors say that could all change.
We may have caught a little bit of a break with a mild November, but as we get into the depths of winter with colder air, inversions, we'll probably see these viruses that have just been smoldering along really start to take off.
Dr. Per Gesteland, a pediatrician at Primary Children's Hospital, says they're also seeing cases of RSV, a life-threatening respiratory virus that affects children.
At the very beginning of our RSV season, and likewise expect that activity to really pick up over the next few weeks.
With these illnesses popping up, doctors are reminding people about the importance of getting the influenza vaccine. Young children, pregnant women, and the elderly are all strongly encouraged to do so because they're at greater risk of complications from the flu. Doctors would like parents and caregivers of children to get the vaccine to develop a cocoon of flu protection. This season, doctors recommend using only flu shots. So far, the vaccine is a good match for the circulating strain of the virus.
And now for those who keep track of China's space missions, Fengyun might not be anything new. But for those who don't, Chinese for wind and clouds, Fengyun is the country's primary meteorological satellite program. Now the program saw its first launch back in 1988 when the Fengyun 1A satellite was launched into a sun-synchronous orbit, followed by Fengyun 1B 2 years later. The development of the series now soon entered a new phase. However, when two Fengyun 2 satellites were launched in 1997 and 2000, China's become only the third country with two weather satellite orbits.
As the Trump administration continues to take shape, the leader of the NSA's cybersecurity SWAT team speaks to Fox News about threats facing the new administration. Cybersecurity, as you know, is a huge concern, and most recently in the wake of these alleged hackings by the Russians.
Thank you, Jenna. The NSA's team has tackled some of the biggest cyber crises in the past 2 years, from China's breach of the Office of Personnel Management, where more than 18 million records were stolen, to the physical destruction of Sony's computer networks by North Korea, and now Russia. And with the looming threat in 2017, their recommendation for the new administration is to bundle together FBI, Homeland Security, and the Defense Department capabilities.
A part of the tail of an almost 100-million-year-old dinosaur has been found encased in a piece of amber, where Chinese paleontologists showcased the fossil at the Shanghai Natural History Museum. A 3D mock-up of the vertebrae behind the feathers is also on display. The amber formed around 99 million years ago, and experts say, well, the tail section belonged to a bird-like dinosaur roughly the size of a chicken. The specimen was named Eva. Our paleontologists hope to find similar specimens in the same region to prove the rich biodiversity of life they believe thrived in Asia millions of years ago. Well, this is the first time dinosaur remains have been found in a fossilized form of amber.
Inside the fake internet news story that led a gunman to open fire at a pizza shop. How a wild conspiracy theory spread with help even from President-elect Trump's national security advisor.
You know, there are a host of unanswered questions about the allegations that the Russian government deployed hackers to disrupt our electoral process and help Donald Trump win the White House. The president-elect responded to all this in an exclusive interview on Fox News Sunday.
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just another excuse. I don't believe it. I don't know why. And I think it's just, they talked about all sorts of things. Every week it's another excuse.
Do you think that the CIA is trying to overturn the results
of the
election or somehow to weaken you in office?
Well, if you look at the story and you take a look at what they said, there's great confusion. Nobody really knows.
We're hearing a lot of talk about fake news these days. Much of it is coming from people who have faked the news for years in the stories they've chosen to cover, the way they've covered them, and in the stories they have ignored. There are so many examples of engaging in fake news. Think Brian Williams falsely claiming he came under fire while covering wars and other statements of his that prove false. Could we say he faked those stories? How about Hillary Clinton claiming she came under fire in Bosnia and had to duck and run after landing? Was she faking it? Was the media faking it when they reported her claims as fact? Recently, Mrs. Clinton called the proliferation of fake news an epidemic. She's right, but for the wrong reason. What about the so-called story about Russian hacking? There's no evidence of that, and FBI Director James Comey refused to acknowledge any Russian hacking at his October news conference. Mainstream journalists and those who are Democrat hacks pretend to be journalists, claim purity when it comes to reporting the news. They see themselves as the ultimate arbiters of what news is and what it isn't. They never think that a major reason so many blogs and websites have proliferated, often spreading rumors, untruths, and yes, some truth, is that people no longer trust the mainstream media. The Boston Herald's Howie Carr had a great column last week in which he noted the rank hypocrisy of the major media when it comes to Republicans and Democrats. When Democrats like Bernie Sanders claimed the election process was rigged, the media brushed it off. But when Donald Trump made the same claim, he was out of bounds.
And a suicide bombing on Saturday in Yemen, claimed to be carried out by ISIL, has killed at least 48 Yemeni soldiers, and officials say another 29 were wounded in the attack. The bombing occurred in the southern port city of Aden when a bomber detonated his explosive belt as hundreds of troops were gathering to collect their monthly pay at the Al Solaban military camp. Local authorities have been pressing on with their campaign against the militant group for several months already, as the jihadists are active in both the southern and eastern parts of the country.
Sunday has been a day of mourning here in Turkey, following Saturday's attack where 38 people were killed. 30 of them were police officers. Now, 155 people have been injured, and many of them are still being treated in the hospital. There was a funeral that was held in Istanbul for 5 of the officers that were killed in the attack. Now, when it comes to the responsibility, the TAK that claimed responsibility is the Kurdistan Freedom Hawkers. Now, this is an offshoot of the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, that's been in conflict with Turkey, with the Turkish military for decades now, and has been in intense fighting in southeastern Turkey over the last couple of months.
This was the first moment of terror. Watch as cars drive along a busy street outside a football stadium, then the unthinkable. From another angle, these musicians with a camera rolling capture the moment of the blast. And just listen to this inside as commentators run for cover. The explosion caused by a car bomb. The football match had just finished and fans were flooding into the streets. Before ambulances could even arrive, a second blast, this one a suicide bomber, detonating barely a kilometer away. The bright flash of light seen around the city. A Kurdish militant group claimed responsibility, saying they weren't targeting civilians, only the police. His president today vowing revenge.
They need to know that we will not let this go unpunished, and that they will pay a higher price for which they need to understand.
The site of the attack, once a place of celebration, is now a somber memorial.
This right here is the exact spot where the car bomb exploded. All day people have been gathering, offering prayers for the victims.
We in Turkey are a very strong country, this man says. These explosions will reinforce our solidarity, unity, and integrity. But this is just the latest in a series of attacks terrorizing the country in the past year, leaving many feeling trapped. I worry about being outside in the daytime, evenings, or nights, this young woman says. because the time and the place, it doesn't matter anymore. And for many, that is their biggest fear, that the terrorists can strike anywhere at any time.
Well, the deadly attacks in Istanbul have triggered a worldwide condemnation. The UN Security Council on Sunday condemned in the strongest terms the heinous and cowardly terrorist attacks. The 15-nation UN body reaffirmed in a press statement that terrorism in all forms constitutes one of the most serious threats to international peace and security. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences and said the perpetrators would be punished. And Iran urged the world countries to deliver a decisive response to the acts of violence perpetrated by extremist terrorists. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also said that Israel expects to work together with Turkey in the fight against terrorism.
Syrian regime forces may be in the final stages of their brutal and relentless offensive to take back Aleppo from rebels. Syrian troops, backed by Russian airstrikes and special forces, are closing in on the remaining pockets of the old city held by rebel forces as the indiscriminate, intense bombing and shelling continue. A mass exodus from the embattled city is growing. Tens of thousands of terrified civilians are streaming out of eastern Aleppo on foot, many too exhausted, too malnourished.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
And in time of domestic crisis, men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite regardless of party or politics.